Our guest now is Ian Vasquez of the Cato Institute. He's director of the Center for Global Liberty and Prosperity. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Topic is U.S. foreign aid, and we'll invite the viewers to phone in on what many people talk about is just 1% of the federal budget. That's what a lot of folks say. But as you look at foreign aid, the amount that's spent out there, what's your take of what this country is getting back for that aid, if anything?
Well, I don't think it's getting back much of anything, but more importantly, foreign aid has effects all over the world, and we have now had more than 6 decades of experience where rich countries, not just the United States, have transferred $2 trillion to developing countries, and you cannot show that foreign aid is effective at promoting growth or promoting economic policies that are consistent with economic growth. In the worst of cases, it actually helps to support dictatorships and regimes that have some of the worst economic policies on record. And so that puts the United States in the position that it was in Egypt, for example, of supporting the very causes of poor people's problems to begin with.
That being said, what should the policy be of this country as we start looking at the new budget cycle and a lot of the problems around the world, including earthquakes and tsunamis, everything in the paper this weekend and elsewhere?
Look, I think we have to distinguish humanitarian and emergency type aid with economic development aid intended to promote long-term development. And that has been a failure. And so I think that we need to abolish those programs. Aid is actually not important to economic development. All of the rich countries today got rich without aid. The countries in the developing world that are successful not because of aid, but because they changed their policies on their own. And it's a little bit frustrating in Washington. Anytime you talk about economic development in the developing world, and there's a lot that's important to talk about, the conversation quickly devolves into one of foreign aid. And the evidence just does not show that aid is important to development. In fact, in many, many cases, it's harmful. So I find the foreign aid discussion a real distraction to what really matters.
Let's take a quick look at the State Department's budget on the screen for fiscal year 2012. The next budget cycle, the request from the White House is $50.9 billion, $51 billion there. The request last year was $51.4 billion. In FY10, $49 billion, so roughly $51 billion. Do you have a sense, Ian Vasquez, how that money is necessarily broken down? What should the viewers know about how that money is spent?
Well, a lot of that money is for State Department type spending. Not all of it is actually for economic development. Some of it is for military aid, and a lot of that is questionable. Some of it is for emergency aid and humanitarian assistance, probably about 20% of the actual aid. So if I were to break down those numbers into what actually could be considered economic development aid, it would probably come out to be about 28 or so billion.
We'll get through some of the numbers as well as we go through the segment here with Ian Vasquez at the Cato Institute. We'll get to your calls in a moment, but wanted to show a short clip of Secretary of State Hillary Clinton Thursday in front of the House Appropriations Committee as she talked about foreign aid spending.
I think it gives us tools that are in addition to and different from our military tools. And I think most Americans don't want to see young Americans going to war. They'd rather see us prevent war, work with like-minded nations to try to help societies resolve conflicts, which is what our diplomats and our development experts do every day. And it's a lot cheaper than sending America to war one more time. So it promotes our security, but it doesn't substitute for defense, but it is an important part of our national security arsenal.
Ian Vasquez, your thoughts?
No, I disagree with that. In fact, I have a real problem with this particular administration's approach of combining more than is usual in the past in the United States, diplomacy, defense, and development spending, because these are very different missions. And you know, when the Cold War ended, and people were looking back at the effectiveness of foreign aid during that period, people realized that it wasn't very good, and advocates of foreign aid said, well, now that the Soviet Union isn't around, spending by the U.S. government can finally be effective on foreign aid. I think that was a naive assumption, because the United States is always going to have national interests that it's going to mix into its foreign aid budget, and that's still going on today, and that's one of the reasons why you find that a majority of aid is still determined by the national security and other concerns of the United States, legitimate or not, and that affects the economic development aid. If a country knows that it's important to the United States for whatever reasons, it's not going to pay attention to using those economic development funds very well, and that's exactly what happens.
First call for our guest, Madison, Wisconsin. It's Bob on the independent line. Hi, Bob.
Good morning.
Morning.
You know, I think you sort of got into this a little bit. You know, a lot of the categories are really sort of a shell game. And, you know, when you say foreign aid to me, it really, the biggest thing that jumps out is the whole military thing. You know, like, basically, this country has become a banana republic. And banana republics cannot run empires anymore, or go out and do things with armies that empires do. And, you know, the prior program segment, the speakers talk about what should be cut, you know, and they omitted defense. You know, we should at least have a 50% cut in defense, bring all those military people home from Afghanistan or Iraq, and just cease and desist all that activity. You know, we in Wisconsin right now, we're suffering, you know, from having to pay for all this stuff because, you know, there's obviously a connection to the federal budget from state budgets and all the way down. You know, people have had it, and to keep screwing around with this kind of spending when we're a banana republic is just ridiculous.
We get the point. Mr. Vasquez.
Well, I actually am partial to reducing U.S. commitments to all sorts of conflicts around the world that don't really have a direct connection to national security. I don't think that the U.S. should be the world's policeman, and it gets into a lot of trouble when it thinks that it can shape events and the outcomes of events in every corner of the world, which is essentially the position that Hillary Clinton has taken when she testified the other day in Congress and pointed to the fact that the U.S. is actually providing subsidies to every country in the world, or programs in every country in the world except for North Korea. What kind of priorities are in place in those programs? Is there real well thought out justification? I don't think so, and there's no evidence that aid is actually helping to promote national security interests in every country in the world. There's a lot of room to cut back. And I agree also with the idea that the Defense Department is also a large bureaucracy that needs to be cut back.